Today we have what I would consider to be one of the biggest updates around Nintendo Switch 2 coming in 2024. Team 2025 and beyond, I think you're going to be on the losing side of this argument. We are literally at a point where Nintendo could be gearing up for their reveal very soon. We now have a supply chain analyst, which this is somebody who is going off of number-based data, specifically with the display of Nintendo's next-gen console. And it's a little bit controversial because if you are somebody who is a fan of OLED technology like I am, it sounds like that's not what we should expect in the next gen console. However, we will be getting a bigger screen at a higher resolution, and there's some very exciting reports around the total mass production of this thing, because I don't want to deal with scalpers when Nintendo finally does release their next gen console, and it sounds like they could indeed be ramping up a massive amount of units to ship in the first fiscal year, which is very exciting news. So we're going to unpack all that. Before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And we have to start out over at VGC, where they have the following detailed typed up article outlining what's been spotted here, originally reported on from Bloomberg. Switch 2 will have an 8-inch LCD screen, analyst claims. Nintendo's next console is expected to release this year. Japan-based Omida analyst Hiroshi Hayashi says the next console will be the main reason for a doubling of shipments in amusement displays in 2024. According to Bloomberg, Hayashi is an analyst who focuses on small and medium displays and makes annual forecasts on their shipments based on checks with companies in the supply chain. Hayashi is therefore well placed to have an understanding of the display market, lending extra credibility to his claim. If the claim of an 8-inch screen turns out to be true, it will mean the successor to the Switch will feature Nintendo's largest display yet. The standard Switch has an LCD screen with a diagonal screen size of 6.2 inches, while the Switch OLED features a 7-inch OLED screen. The Switch Lite screen is a smaller 5.5 inches. Although the company is yet to comment publicly, Nintendo Switch successor is widely to expect to launch later this year. VGC reported last summer that development kits for Switch 2 were in the hands of key partner studios, with a launch expected in late 2024. Two sources VGC spoke to at the time suggested the console could launch with an LCD screen instead of the more premium OLED in order to bring down cost, especially considering the increased storage needed for higher fidelity games. So let's first dive into the LCD versus OLED conversation, because if you're somebody who is an OLED model owner, you know just how big of a massive leap forward that was in display quality when you look at a base model Switch side by side with an OLED. Clearly, the colors are in an entire different league when you're talking about looking at them on the OLED. The depth of the colors, the clarity of the screen, it all really is a true significant step up. And I tell people, if you don't play in handheld mode, don't upgrade to the OLED model. But if you do play in handheld, the OLED model is literally a day and night difference in quality. However, one key distinction here is that we are not in 2017 anymore, and LCD displays have come a long way since that point in time, and I've legitimately seen some LCD displays that I would pair up against an OLED, and really, I'm still a fan of OLED technology. That's definitely the cream of the crop in my opinion, but there is potentially a much smaller gap between them depending on how premium the LCD display actually is. Not to mention, we have reports from Necro Felipe and Universo Nintendo stating that this thing is expected to have a 1080p screen, which would be a massive upgrade from the 720p resolution we currently have on the Nintendo Switch OLED, leading to a higher pixels per inch, more crisp image. Not to mention, if the screen can technically get brighter than what the OLED can, that can also enhance the colors and the visuals. And while you might not be able to get some of the deep dark blacks that are only possible via an OLED display because of how the organic light emitting diode, what it stands for, basically there's pixels that can be completely off instead of having to be on trying to display that black color, which is why you get a little bit more of that deep richness in the colors of an OLED display. It's not going to have those capabilities, but again, LCD technology is not the same thing we were talking about with the base model Switch in 2017. So I don't think Nintendo is going to completely jump backwards here, and we all look at the handheld display of the Switch 2 and say this thing looks like crap compared to the OLED. I don't think it's going to be that type of comparison, but I do think that you might see a little bit of a gap in the color richness and the depth of the colors, but it's not going to be day and night. And I personally will take the larger 8-inch display, because while some people are worried about the size of that whenever you're holding it in handheld, I think if they eliminate almost all of the bezels around the screen and they just get it to a point where the system itself is slightly bigger than the Switch we have today, it will likely be a bigger form factor. Definitely keep that in mind with an 8-inch display. It sounds like it will be, but I think that might be the perfect size for handheld play, because I already really enjoy a 7-inch OLED, but I'm telling you, as somebody who likes to game on a TV primarily whenever possible, the little bit bigger, the better. And I do think that 8-inch display size might have me playing in handheld mode even more than I do now with my OLED currently. Now, we also have to talk about the mass market production that could be right around the corner for Nintendo's next-gen console, and that has to do with Nintendo's own comments recently in previous investor meetings where they were asked the questions from investors around how they might navigate a scalper situation for the launch of their next-gen hardware, because nobody likes to pay scalper prices. If you grew up in the Wii generation trying to track one of those down when they were the new hot ticket item, you know a thing or two about that. If you were searching for a PS5 or Xbox Series X or S during the launch period of those during the pandemic, like, you also know exactly how crazy it can be to find one of these brand new consoles when everybody wants one, and some people cave to literally buying the console double the cost and value over on eBay or another reseller website. And fortunately, Nintendo's plan that they said to investors, which was to just wait until they could make enough stock to ramp up to what they believed would be the consumer demand for this product, would kind of be their strategy. And that is what we are seeing from these new reports, as you can see the following tweet from Takahashi Mochizuki over at Bloomberg, which says display shipment data suggests Nintendo would make 10 million plus of its next-gen console in the initial fiscal year. Unlike PS5 and Xbox Series X and S that faced chip shortages at launch, Nintendo's would be much easier to find at stores. And about OLED version, Amada says not for this year. So 10 plus million in the first fiscal year is definitely not a bad number, especially considering that we are not expecting Nintendo to actually launch this console and make it available for purchase until something like later into 2024, potentially anywhere from the window as early as May, although that seems a little bit too soon at this point in time, or as late as September. And I do think September is a very likely month at this point in time. But if they do something like 10 to 15 million in the first fiscal year, which will reset in March of 2025, that should be ample stock to go around for the first round of holiday sales, and hopefully enough day one for early adopters that want to pre-order this thing and get it as soon as the initial drops are available. It will probably still have stock shortage issues in certain markets, certain places of the world. That's just more or less par for the course with these new big tech items, but I do hope that Nintendo will solve for the scalping situation as much as possible, and it definitely sounds like they're going to be ramping up mass production in a big way due to the expected demand. And depending on what they have up their sleeves with must-own games, quote unquote, to launch the next-gen console, they might need all of that stock and then some. Now, the last thing I want to briefly mention in terms of new Nintendo Switch 2 updates, in terms of what to expect with this console, actually has to do with something that Andres Restart pointed out. At least that was where I saw it, and he was sourcing Nintendo leaks on this. But you guys probably remember when we talked about the idea of Nintendo Switch 2 having a colored button layout similar to that of the Super Famicom or the SNES over in the European regions, and also in line with what we saw Nintendo do with the new 3DS consoles when they launched, kind of trying to do something to the consumer to differentiate this new model so you know it's different even though it's in a very similar form factor, kind of like what we're expecting to see with the Switch 2. We're expecting it to be the same kind of general form factor of the Switch, but just with the larger display and a little bit larger body, and then we could be talking about colored buttons to help identify it to a casual consumer that's browsing for what's new from Nintendo at their local store. Well, there is a Nintendo Live promotional video that Nintendo of Hong Kong actually shared, and it seems to feature those exact colored buttons we've been talking about in various different first-party and third-party Nintendo Switch games as of late, and it has it straight up in their marketing promotional material, unless if Nintendo is planning some kind of revision for the Switch base model or even the Lite model, which they very well may, but I would be very surprised to see them include colored buttons on that when the original Switch didn't, and they might be aligning that with some kind of price drop plan. But I definitely think that this is something that Nintendo is just putting the pieces in place for their future marketing, and they're starting to roll that out in current games like Super Mario RPG, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, and even a number of third-party games that we've talked about, and now it's in direct Nintendo promotional marketing material. Like, they're gonna go to this colored buttons format. I'd be willing to bet money on it at this point that when we see that official reveal trailer for the Nintendo Switch 2, that it's going to have those Super Famicom colored button layouts, because all the colors match each other. It matches exactly what Nintendo's done with with the Super Famicom and also the new 3DS. And I'm just hoping that they are going that kind of Super Nintendo nostalgia route, because I would love to see them call this thing the Super Nintendo Switch. But whatever it's called, there's more evidence than ever. Like I said at the beginning of the video, if you were Team 2025 or don't think it's coming out this year, I just think you're wrong. But you let me know in the comments down below. That's where I want to hear from you guys. How do you feel about all the new information and reports backing up 2024 once again for Nintendo to launch their next gen hardware with an 8-inch LCD screen? How do you feel about LCD versus OLED? Do you feel like it's a big step back, especially considering we might be talking about a $400 price point for this thing? Are you like me and you're a little bit less concerned because you know that LCD has come a long way in its display tech, and you think that the image will still largely look a lot better, or at least very comparable to the OLED that we have today, especially with the higher resolution and potentially a higher brightness for the screen? And what are some launch games that you would love to see Nintendo put out day one for the successor to the Switch's launch? Do you think 3D Mario and a new DK is a shoe-in? Do you think we might get a look at any kind of new announcements for the Switch 2, but maybe just not confirmed to be Switch 2 at the upcoming supposed Nintendo Direct in February? Do you think Metroid Prime 4 might be a cross-gen launch title? And how are you feeling about the successor to the Switch as a whole? The more we learn about it, the closer we get to its final reveal. But regardless of your thoughts and feelings on everything we talked about today, I do look forward to hearing from you all in the comments down below before you leave the video, as I do look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all around these topics. Go watch the video on screen next if you haven't already. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.